how folks or businesses or even business leaders perceive security, and
Mhm.
how should that look, and what should that, how should that, how does success look in that space to them? And I think that the biggest challenge that we've had is the lack of education, really. Just, and in terms of just understanding what types of, risks are out there, which are the most common ones.
Welcome. You found CISO Stressed, brought to you by SCYTHE, the biweekly conversation hosted by me, Lawyer Liz, Chief of Staff at SCYTHE, and inviting guests from the executive suite to talk about things that are top of mind, tip of tongue when it comes to the CISO role, as well as just cybersecurity in general. So with that, find us on YouTube, find on SCYTHE's YouTube channel, find us on wherever you listen to your audio podcast, be it Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and sit back, enjoy, grab a cup of coffee. Let's get started. So this week we're chatting with a friend who has been in the, I'd say, IT cybersecurity field for probably, once again, more years than we care to count. But Aldan Berrie, and he started off in the private practice, but also now, you have the, I'd say, even more difficult task of wrangling from an MSP provider perspective, of working with these small, medium-sized businesses and helping them scale and fight the fight that, if you've got nation state actors trying to disrupt your systems and you're a small 10-person company, that's quite a challenge. So Aldan, thank you for joining us. And also thank you for helping companies level up.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. So yes, we have definitely been working in that space for quite some time now. So, and it's definitely not without its challenges, so to speak.
Well, and one of the things that struck me, and while we focus so frequently, the conversation is around these big companies. I mean, you hear Colonial Pipeline, that everyone forgets that the same responses, the same attacks are coming at, mom and pop bakeries and other businesses, that a disruption to them is catastrophic because it's not necessarily the same scale, but at the same time, it means they can't make payroll. They have to shut their doors. So what was it that drew you to providing those services?
So basically, having worked for a Fortune 1000 previously, we basically working with a lot of the tools and solutions that they utilize inside of their IT stack in order to provide for security that is necessary for businesses that have, as you mentioned, much higher risk profile and much more value at risk than smaller businesses. One of the things that we wanted to take on was basically transferring as best as possible those types of protections and capabilities for the small business space, which a lot of times doesn't quite have the same budgetary capability in terms of
Mhm.
basically being able to apply funds in those in the security space. A lot of times small businesses, they really just try to make sure that things work, so to speak. But essentially it's becoming much more and more important as time goes by, was, as you mentioned, with these types of attacks. So
Well, and one of the things too that I really liked about your company's approach that people forget about these days is that y'all focus working with customers and businesses that are actually based within the same state, so the same region, as that people forget, that on-prem touch because so much is in the cloud. But there's something reassuring about saying, no, I know something's going sideways with my system, or we're having an attack. And instead of having to describe it over a Zoom call, or, to be able to say, can y'all just come fix this? Hey, I really liked that approach. What first started? I mean, how have y'all been able to maintain that reach and that touch?
Well, to be honest, that was a format that was favored much, much more prior to the pandemic, of course. So essentially, what we found was that folks were just much more comfortable with the type of advisement as it relates to their infrastructure and their technology when they get a chance to get to know you and understand what your capabilities are and get to know you a little bit more on a personable basis. So, and frankly, the smaller the business is, the more of a requirement we found that to be. So, obviously, we've been having to leverage a little bit more of a um, virtual platform to engage with clients as of lately over the last 18 months or so. But it's definitely been something that small businesses tend to favor in the sense of basically being able to, meet in person and again, understand a little bit more about each other, things that just don't always come across in a virtual platform.
Well, and it's certainly, again, I mean, there's always a laugh when you look at, statistically speaking, a lot of the instances, a lot of the breaches, accounting is always one of the guilty, attack vectors, and entry points, or legal or HR. That when you have that, but that's actually, instead of being an entire department, that's just one person sitting there. How do some of those conversations and solutions and approaches scale? Because you've worked for the big, Fortune 1000, and now you're helping the smaller. So really, again, how does that scale with how you approach solutions for your customers?
Well, in order to scale a lot of those types of offerings that we have, we sometimes we'll partner with a vendor that will essentially allow for some additional ancillary services if necessary. It depends on the footprint and just how much we are needing to scale. Most small businesses we can accommodate, with the platforms and solutions that we have in house. However, we do have, some solution offerings that require us to partner in order to basically be able to augment their staffing to to the scale that they actually would need or require. Now, that's usually typically for more along the lines of a medium-sized business in order to do that. But it's not easy to scale and keep things working. As you know, security and usability oftentimes have an inverse relationship. So our job is basically to try and make sure that we are maintaining the same security posture that's necessary, but at the same time, make sure that it's usable for their folks to actually be able to, at the same time, generate revenue and, follow through with their work processes and procedures.
Well, and I feel like a lot of the conversation too looks at these as if the bigger size companies are, the standard, but forgetting that a majority of the cybersecurity risk, like how much of your day is dependent on these smaller, medium size. So scaling it not up, but scaling it down. So it seems, MSPs have certainly provided a vital role in leveraging that, so that the mom and pop, office supply company or, services provider doesn't have to go and spend thousands upon thousands of dollars they didn't have. How do y'all vet what you bring into your stack?
So we vet our vendors using the first thing we look to do is understand if they have been objectively evaluated. There are a lot of platforms and whatnot for say Gartner, Forrester, those types of third party evaluations can actually offer us a little bit of insight, at least in terms of, has someone quote unquote objectively reviewed, this particular product.
Or did they sponsor a magic quadrant?
Yes, there's obviously there are factors like this, like that to consider. In addition to that, another element that we use is we basically contact them directly and ask them what type of compliancy audits have they completed. Have they established a SOC 2 Type 2? Are they following a specific NIST framework? Are they have they completed a third-party audit within the last 6 to 12 months, and what were the results of that? We're going through that with our co-location vendor now. So basically, this is a process that we have to rinse and repeat annually to semi-annually, depending on which product or solution it is.
So when you hear the conversations enter in the discussions within the industry, what are some of the challenges that stick out in your mind that you want to kind of raise your hand and go, hey, sure, this is nice, but how does that, relating to the sector that you work with, that you just kind of go, hey, y'all are forgetting this or forgetting that? What comes to mind, or how often a day do you want to just shout like, but that's not how it works for everybody else?
Well, every day. So essentially, there's a big misinterpretation a lot of times in terms of how folks or businesses or even business leaders perceive security, and how should that look, and what should that how does success look in that space to them? And I think that the biggest challenge that we've had is the lack of education, really. Just and in terms of just understanding what types of risks are out there, which are the most common ones. A lot of times a vendor is going after scenarios, trying to address risks in areas that we don't really see as often, as other areas where we see every day, and we try to stress that and say, well, actually this is not what we're seeing out there where the rubber hits the road. We're seeing different types of challenges that are actually a lot more involved with their employees and end users, however you'd like to refer to them, and basically how they are interacting with technology on a daily basis, as opposed to the back end, more advanced pieces that are much more ones and zeros and much more technical for most folks to really understand and comprehend.
Well, there was the joint report released in the last couple of weeks that talked about the most common, CVEs and different things that you see, and they're the tried and true vulnerabilities and attacks that aren't the latest hotness, dead sexy. It's the same old stuff. So when you're coming in with a new customer, or even with a company that you've worked with, or how do you kind of get them on the same page of, don't focus on, yes, this is the shiny object, but really let's focus on fixing, patching, addressing, tracking these issues?
Well, that's a tough one, and it's a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge for us to kind of, I guess, reframe the conversation, so to speak. Essentially, yeah, you're right. There's definitely some marketing buzzwords and technological advances out there that folks hear about, and they kind of get stuck on that capability or that feature because it's supposedly, the bee's knees as it relates to, securing everything. It is the easy button. But and that's what we all seek today. Time is the one thing that no one really has a surplus of. So I would say that a lot of times we're all guilty of kind of looking for that easy button. But as you mentioned, it's really about the blocking and tackling, and it's not sexy. It is, it's not even all that interesting a lot of times. But it is the way to get things done. Making sure that you're focusing on your processes and procedures and your change management controls, and making sure that, like you said, all those elements that I'll mention again that basically relate more to the less sexy blocking and tackling elements. That's what really makes the difference. But you're right, it is not an easy thing to convince someone of when they are looking for that buzzword or that easy button in order to basically secure the fortress, so to speak.
Yeah, and one of the things I know with Superior Solutions, y'all have been in business for I mean, I joked at the beginning a bit over a decade. Are there times where you almost wish you had recorded something? It's kind of was it the IT crowd joke of where they recorded the "Have you tried turning it off and turning it on again?" Are there things that you kind of like, all right, welcome to working with us. Here is, please watch this video where you just record going, have you tried turning it on and off again? Like, have you done this? Have you done this? Like, what are some of the things, how do you keep their attention? How do you not fall into that?
Another question that we deal with, a challenge that we deal with regularly. It is how do you put lipstick on it? I guess how do you make it interesting enough for someone to actually listen and pay attention? So we try to draw a direct correlation to their bottom line, really, because the impacts on businesses it becomes financial. Is it not just relating to business process inefficiencies or inefficiencies in their technology, but security events, whether they're cybersecurity events like a ransomware attack or something like that, that is most of the time that can bring a business to a complete stopping point. And you're dealing with, reporting, and what data was compromised, what all do we, what institutions do we need to report to, what formal processes do we need to follow to make sure that, we're following through with our due diligence, and that type of impact on a business. Speaking to that with plenty of examples to pull from lately, as you know, that sometimes will hit home, luckily enough. And basically, they actually do begin to realize what value at risk they have as it relates to those types of incidences.
Well, that's one of the things, even with SCYTHE platform, when we try to do our adversary emulations and some of our trainings that we'll put online, is we try to bring it back to that business case of, hey, here's why you care. And when it comes to the bottom line, do you feel like that resonates? It sounds like it does, that being able to kind of draw them back of, look, sure, this is boring, but invest here because the average cost to you is X. I mean, how does it eventually start to sink in?
So identifying and measuring costs that's not necessarily tangible is not an easy thing to do. But it isn't. It's not too abstract to try and get them to think about their operations basically stopping, or them not being able to get access to their data, or having to inform their clients that the information or data from their clients has been compromised. I received a letter from a car dealership very recently that I had done a leasing program through, and they basically were letting me know that all my personal information is now out there, on the dark web, so to speak. And basically, just that type of that can be a little bit of a deterrent at times. Luckily enough, who wants to explain that to their client base? Who wants to, not be able to, actually generate revenue? So, those, again, it's not always that these elements can hit home, but I do think it's getting a little bit easier to do that with all of the more recent types of attacks, and the attention that's being finally paid a little bit more to those elements and what's going on with businesses.
Well, and are there ways that you either advise customers or that y'all look for to provide those kind of that force multiplier of, hey, here's the benefit to utilizing an MSP, but here's some other things that you can do to get the most bang for your buck? I mean, other than using Scythe, of course.
Right. So, you mean more specifically in terms of what we might use in order to provide like a force multiplier for those?
Yeah. Or are there ways that when you can look at someone's system and go, hey, you're doing X, but maybe approach a different Y, why, how often do y'all have to have those conversations?
Well, every engagement really initially, obviously there's a need to get on the same page with at least a benchmark, or a starting point for what is the expected basic standards today, because a lot of businesses don't realize that even the most basic protections include a much longer list these days than they used to. But one of the methods or tools that we use is obviously um, uh, informed staff, and basically experience, staff that has experience and has training in that space, in order to be able to, obviously augment what may be a skill set that they've had difficulty in sourcing themselves.
Well, and too, you think of hopefully most employees are getting up to speed on looking out for the phishing emails, and yet business email compromise continues to be like one of the number one threats of how people are getting in. Do y'all work with different providers to help craft? I mean, I know there were some certain training providers that took unique approaches during COVID that a lot of folks kind of push back and go, let's not do that. But what are some of the training tools that y'all have used, or partnerships that you've built to help do that without crossing that line?
Yeah, so we do implement end user training
Mhm.
for, and that actually incorporates elements where there's video training, there's some reading literature, and then there's essentially some fake phishing attempts, as well as tracking in terms of what they actually do when they interact with those. Did they even open the email? Did they click on the link? Did they do the things? Did they behave consistently with the educational material? And then we provide reporting on that in terms of what they actually did. Did they complete the video? Did they read the information? And then when we did the false simulation testing, did they click the link? Did they do the things? Or were they consistent, in terms of the training? And so that kind of helps them identify who might need to, go through the
Mhm.
material a little bit more, you know? Um, so
Yeah.
that is one of the tools that we do, but I'll tell you, it's, you know, whether it's link inspection, end user training, email filtering is another, much more advanced term. Sounds very basic, and it's been around for a long
Mhm.
time, but some of the tools that we use for that are, take it to a level that is far and beyond spam filtering these days. It's, full blown link inspection and an attachment scanning, obviously, but there is, as you mentioned, there's also obviously that educational component that is just as much or more important, really, because that's where a lot of the vectors occur.
Well, and you hear so often a lot of the successful attacks are through those links. And for those listening in, we've been chatting with Aldan Berrie from Superior Solutions based in Atlanta, Georgia. And one of the things that we try to do with CISO Stressed, and this coming in mind that you're not necessarily a big sweet tooth fan, but stressed, spelled backwards, is desserts. And with desserts, you think of it as a way to cap off a day or a meal, and kind of a high note to end on. So, as one who deals with every day, y'all are educating, y'all are working with your customers and protecting systems and finding new ways to leverage their budgets and scale all that. So, what's something you do to cap off your day that maybe not desserts, but at least to kind of end on a high note?
To cap off our day with our client base, or is that
Or just
with?
you.
Ha,
And
okay.
playing with your boys is an absolutely acceptable answer because they are pretty fabulous. But
Well,
um,
so fair enough. I will have to mention that as well because it's certainly part of my day. But one of the, I guess, a little bit less sexy things or that we do is actually we do study and have to make sure that we're reading up on materials and any types of information that pertains to cybersecurity type event. Because being educated on that, we have to actually first inform ourselves, read up on that material, and make sure that we disseminate what we can to our client base. But yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, for me, I do go home and essentially just work with my two sons in order to actually try to get them as much as I can interested into sports and using their energy in that capacity as opposed to wrestling and tearing up the house.
well, good luck with that because they certainly have a lot of energy. Well, where can people find out more information about some of the work you've done, your company? What are some ways people can get in touch with you?
Sure. So one of the ways to get in touch with us is to, visit our website at superiorsolution.com. Our company name is plural, but the website is singular. So it is without the S on the end there. But we have a chat. We have a representative that is, available and on standby for chat for any questions that someone may have as a visitor in terms of, what it is that we're doing or if they have any questions relating to some of the services that we offer. In addition to that, we do have a LinkedIn page as well as Facebook. But I would say that and Twitter. But I would say that the quickest way to engage would be to either give us a call or actually visit our website and let us know if there's any questions or concerns about what we're doing today.
Well, it's excellent. And of course, shameless plug again for SCYTHE's library of resources, materials. Hopefully, we can be of continued service for you and other folks as because keeping up with the latest and greatest is always difficult. But thank you for sharing some of the challenges that y'all help address as an MSP working in, focused on the SMB. And for those watching, listening, thank you for joining. I've been your host, Lawyer Liz, on Twitter, Liz Wharton with SCYTHE. Visit SCYTHE, visit CISO Stressed on catch up with the prior episodes. And as always, keep up with the SCYTHE unicorns on our YouTube channel, website, and Twitter. So thank you again, Aldan, and catch everyone next time.
Thank you, Liz.